How Clark Gable was a part in Hollywood's biggest cover-up. Loretta Young and Clark Gable were also known for their part in one of the biggest Hollywood cover-ups of all time. First, Young would finish shooting 2 additional films, making public appearances throughout. On April the 21st, she was part of the wedding party for Hollywood director Tay Garnett. On May the 6th, she hosted a tea for the press in her backyard. Then, Young would publicly become very exhausted. A profile published in Movie Classic in June called her the most tired little person in Hollywood, after months of working 18-hour days. Still, Young was careful to appear in public just enough so that no one could misconstrue her fatigue for pregnancy. Ed Sullivan, then a Society columnist, detailed a whirlwind Manhattan weekend, and when Young and her mother, Gladys, set sail for Europe on June the 29th, that too was featured in the papers, as were reports of her active social calendar whilst abroad, hosted by prominent expats and countesses. When they returned home on August 21st, Gladys told reporters that Young had been in ill health for some time and had recently lost considerable weight, the inverse of what had actually occurred. Dr. Halloran also made the all-important order for Young to refrain from motion picture work for at least 2 months. The illness itself was never disclosed, but that was common practice at the time, especially when the condition was of an extremely delicate nature, code for gynecological. Back in Los Angeles, Young hid in a cottage located in a newly developed corner of Venice, far from the Hollywood crowd. Best friend Josie Wayne, wife to John, came to visit, throwing her arms around Young but never acknowledging the pregnancy, nor did Tracy, who stopped by while Young was swaddled in comforters and told her he loved her. Young eventually found herself so stir-crazy that her family would drive her, late at night, to cul-de-sac, just so she could walk about, and drive in movies where she'd be kept from sight. For all their publicity manoeuvring, rumours still swirled, which is why, a month before the baby's due date, the family arranged for a visit from prominent gossip columnist Dorothy Manners. Manners was given only 20 minutes with Young, who greeted her from the bed, a mountain of pillows strategically arranged. It's unknown if Manners bought Young's subterfuge or simply understood her own role in maintaining the publicity line, but the first paragraph of her piece served to disabuse all rumours save the one. Loretta Young is not suffering from an incurable illness that will keep her from the screen for a year or more. Her beauty has not been marred in a secret serious accident, nor is she penniless, existing on the financial help of influential friends in a pathetic condition. From her bed, Young painted herself as a woman on the mend. I am slender and I look delicate, but I'm not. While she was sad to miss her sister's upcoming wedding, I've still got my books, my thoughts, and my cigarettes. As the birth approached, the biggest concern was the milkman, namely whether or not he'd hear Young's screams as she went into labour. Young's mother and sisters worked together to soundproof the house, lining the windows with blankets and towels. When, on November 6, 1935, her screams started, Dr. Halloran chloroformed her. A backup doctor and nurse, unaware of the identity of the woman giving birth in secret, idled in a car down the street, while Young went into labour on her sister Sally's massage table. Young gave birth to a healthy baby girl, naming her Judy after St. Jude, the patron saint, in Young's words, of difficult situations. That afternoon a telegram, sender still unknown, arrived for Clark Gable, in New York for the premiere of Mutiny on the Bounty. Beautiful blue-eyed blonde baby girl born, 8:15 this morning. Gable purportedly tore the telegram into pieces. In the weeks to come, Young stayed in the Venice house with Judy and a nurse, Frenchie, who helped care for the baby. On November 13th, Halloran filed a birth certificate for Judy, with the mother listed as Margaret Young, who had been employed as an artist in the motion pictures for the last 10 years. The space for a father was left blank, a reflection of Young's intention to keep Gable out of Young's life. 4 days later, Gable, who had been publicly linked with Young, socialite Mary Taylor and actress Elizabeth Allen, denied relationships with all three. All the rumours are all wrong, although I am very flattered. While Gable was denying his involvement, Young was preparing a very public return. The Sun newspaper ran a PR plant article, supposedly penned by Loretta, on How to Be Beautiful. She appeared in Screenland in a full-length picture with the headline Loretta Recovers. On New Year's Eve, she attended a massive party at producer Samuel Goldwyn's. By January she was back at work, wrapping her aching breasts as they leaked milk, and loaned out to MGM for an upcoming film role, which meant working on the same studio lot as Gable, who grabbed fellow MGM star Spencer Tracy and decided to surprise Loretta on set. Young couldn't look Tracy in the eye. At first, Judy stayed in the Venice house with Frenchie, and Young visited when possible. When Frenchie approached the housekeeper with an offer to blackmail Loretta, the housekeeper alerted the family, launching them into high gear. Within days they'd placed Judy in a Catholic orphanage until Loretta could feasibly adopt her without scandal. That time came on June the 10th, 1937, when Young announced the adoption of 2 young girls via Luella Parsons' gossip column. Parsons was well versed in the ways of innuendo. Loretta Young, film star, admitted to me today she is a mother by adoption. She'd been adopting an older girl aged 4 and a younger one just 23.5 months. There is just one thing I can tell you, Young told Parsons, and that is where I got the children, and I want to forget as soon as possible that they are not mine. Nearly a month later, Young announced that a relative of the older girl had surfaced to claim her back, leaving Young with a single adopted baby girl, birth date strategically altered, by the name of Judy. If rumours of an illicit pregnancy remained, the press didn't cover them. Young's popularity continued to grow, and gossip focused on her love life, the coverage of which struck the same tone as before Judy's birth. She was linked with director Joe Mankiewicz, with actor David Niven, with co-star Tyrone Power. but it was not to be taken seriously, one gossip columnist wrote. After all, Loretta is always reported romantically inclined towards her leading man. It is just a gag with her. But Young had also taken on the slightly moralising tone that would only amplify as she aged, and against which her cover-up would be judged. When a young woman told her that men wouldn't leave her alone, Young retorted, "Do you tempt them?" The young woman then asked Young about her time with Tracy, wondering if she had dared be alone in a room with him. "Certainly," Young responded. "I've been alone in a room with him. I know what I'm doing all the time. Every woman does if she wants to. Give some men half a chance or less, and they'll make a pass at you. No man ever, as the quaint saying goes, insulted me, unless I gave him some sort of opening." It's moralising, but in hindsight, it's also a public form of self-shaming. In her mind, she was the only person responsible for the pregnancy. She invited Gable to visit the baby, which she recalls he did a single time. Young also opened a bank account where he could contribute to her care, but it remained empty. She shielded Judy from cameras, using bonnets to disguise her Dumbo ears that looked, rather obviously, like Clark Gable's. When Judy was 7, she underwent surgery to have them pinned back. An elaborate lie, but, in Young's mind, a necessary one. In 1940, Young met and married Tom Lewis, a handsome advertising executive. By 1945, she'd given birth to 2 sons, Chris and Peter. In 1948, she won Best Actress for acquiring a somewhat plausible Swedish accent in The Farmer's Daughter, and The Secret Held. According to Chris, his father never explicitly addressed or questioned Judy's parentage. The night before they got married, she said, "Is there anything you want to ask me, anything that you want to know?" She was asking him, "Do you want to know?" and he said, No, I'm fine." They just agreed to not go down that path. It was simpler not to, and he loved Judy. Gable, whose third marriage to Carol Lombard had ended in her tragic death in a plane crash, remarried in 1949, this time to Sylvia Ashley. The same year, Young and Gable were cast as romantic leads in Keys to the City. MGM had been struggling for a hit in the post-war decline of the studio system, and a member of its old stable of stars seemed the surest bet, especially if paired with an old love interest. When studio head Dor Sherry, a long-time friend of Young's, asked if she'd play the role, Young surprisingly accepted, perhaps out of duty to Sherry, or, more likely, as yet another savvy publicity move. No one would think that the rumoured mother of his child would agree to star as his romantic interest. Production went smoothly up until when Young, filming a scene that required the generation of smoke, collapsed on set. Gable carried her to her dressing room, and the press reported it was simply complications from a pregnancy that hadn't yet been made public. 15 days later, however, Young miscarried the baby. Still, she finished the film, and hosted the premiere party at her home, which Gable attended and where he would be introduced, however cursorily, to Young's children, Judy included. Young performed requisite publicity for the film's release, and an article published under her byline spent paragraphs recalling her time on the set of Call of the Wild, going on to highlight just how little she'd seen of Gable in the years since. I know this will seem odd to people in other parts of the country, but the fact is that distances in Southern California are great. The result has been that our only exchanges through the years have been a mutually tossed greeting across a crowded room at a big party. And so Loretta's life moved on. Home videos show her vacationing in Sun Valley with various Hollywood families, her family of 5 travelling, with matching outfits for the boys, to Hawaii. With Tom Lewis's advertising expertise, it was easy to package a television show, named for Loretta herself, that would become a mainstay of 50s television. She became steadily more public and more moralising, a devoted and public Catholic who spoke freely about her faith and commitment to various Catholic charities, especially orphanages and women's aid associations like St Anne's. Judy wouldn't learn about Gable until 1958 when, at age 23, she told her fiancé, Joe Tinney, that she couldn't marry him. "I don't know anything about myself, you know everything about yourself, and I don't know anything about me." Tinney's response, accumulated from years of overheard conversations and innuendo: "You're wrong. I know everything about you. Your father is Clark Gable." This exchange was made public in Judy's 1994 memoir, Uncommon Knowledge, which was published after years of estrangement from Young. According to Judy's brother Chris, their relationship disintegrated after a Mother's Day family gathering when Judy demanded that her mother tell her the truth, a request that prompted Young to retreat to her room and vomit. Uncommon Knowledge paints a sympathetic portrait of Gable while interrogating her mother's choices. As she writes on the first page of the book, "My life has been filled with hypocrisy and deception from the moment I was born." With Judy, Loretta was trapped. She had this lie and no way to frame it. She took full responsibility for hiding it all her life. To be stuck, so caught, in such a public way. What could she have done with that? Judy wouldn't learn about Gable until 1959, when she demanded the truth. Young retreated to her room and vomited. Young and Judy were in the earliest stages of mending their relationship, however, and Young didn't want to reopen the rift. Later, she said, "Well, you know, this wouldn't help Judy." Over the next few years, it became clear that Ed Funk's long-germinating biography would not come to pass, and Young agreed to work with Joan Wester Anderson on a memoir that would be published after her death, and in which she could publicly confirm, for the first time, that Judy was indeed her and Gable's daughter. Young died on August the 12th, 2000 at age 87. The year before, she'd been photographed for Vanity Fair, still resplendent in beauty, with a caption that read, "She elected not to talk about whether or not her daughter was the child of Clark Gable, with whom she made The Call of the Wild in 1935. For that, much honour. My appeal wouldn't have been to the intellectuals or the neurotics, nor to the shopgirls and secretaries. That would have been Joan Crawford's market. But there was an awful lot of women out there who were like me, who were willing to play by the rules, didn't sleep around, and were very aggressive. A Loretta Young movie had a happy ending. That's what it was geared to. A nice husband, nice lover, no abuse of any kind. That's what the heroes and heroines were in those days."